Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck taking over, I think that is a natural conclusion to come to, and I would rather that than I think they were going to bring on some merchandising guy at Disney instead.
Yeah, Disney's got that covered.
Yeah,
they know what they're doing with merchandising.
But it spoke like when Bob Chapek was taking over Disney, and they were like, well, he's good at managing the parks, he'll be good at managing the studio, and then it turned out he wasn't good at managing the parks, and then therefore wasn't good at managing the studio.
Right. And even if he was good at managing parks, it's a whole different animal that you're doing.
Right, exactly. And so he was the one that was like, more sequels, more streaming, that kind of thing. That was Bob Chapek's
quantity over quality, basically.
Quantity over quality. We pump the parks full of IP, not original ideas, that kind of thing. And we do. That was Bob Chapek. And now Disney's kind of cutting back on that. Now that Bob Iger's stepping away, but they were kind of threatening to bring someone similar to Bob Chapek in earlier in the year before Celebration. There were strings around this Disney exec coming into her role. He hadn't been that involved in the franchise. Maybe he had produced a couple of things. I can't remember his name, but it's better to have Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck because they've been around forever. And,
Yeah. We were just talking about Carrie Beck a little bit right before we hit record, and you were saying that she has been in it for all the animation stuff, and then she's been part of at least some of the Disney Plus live action series, like The Mandalorian, which was huge for Disney Plus. I think still is huge for Disney Plus. And a lot of, I don't understand where this turn came from, where Dave Filoni went to be like, oh, it's the master and apprentice, and George Lucas was the master, and Filoni's the apprentice, to Filoni can't tell a story, get him out of here. I don't know why or when that happened.
Well, it's not constructive in any way to be that, Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like, as someone who isn't the biggest fan of Ahsoka and some of the worst parts of Mandalorian, I don't blame that all on Filoni, Like, I kind of feel like there's enough coming out now that we know about Ahsoka and Mandalorian where so much of it was mandated by the execs to get more streaming stuff out there, so they didn't get the time or the budget to do the stories that they wanted to tell. And in Mandalorian's case, they didn't have their star to do the story that they wanted to tell, for that third season as well. And I think there's something to be said about like putting so much onto someone to make the greatest things in the world, which is what everybody expects from Star Wars, is a lot. And you just telling them to like that they suck and they should go away is never the best move. Like, you want to be like more constructive than that, than just saying just get out of here. I feel like Filoni, for all his shortcomings, works best with collaborators, and so it's sort of like, you have to remember that what he's been a part of with the early stuff of Mandalorian, with Rebels, with Clone Wars, wasn't all him. It was him working with a lot of other smart animators. And Bad Batch was that way too. He wasn't that involved in that, but he empowered the creators of that show to go out and tell their best stories in animation.
Because he didn't even create Ahsoka.
No, he didn't. Yeah,
everyone keeps saying, Filoni just loves his animated characters, going to jam them down our throats. It's like, well, one, Star Wars animation has been incredible. The Clone Wars is a great show. Rebels, I'll still say I never got super into the art style of either of them, but the storytelling makes it so worth it. I can get past it easily. Bad Batch, they just keep getting better and better as they go.
Yeah.
And like you said, they were collaborations. It's not one guy with the ultimate keys to the kingdom. And the other thing people have to remember is, like, you're letting history repeat itself, where you clamored for decades, more Star Wars, more Star Wars. We got the prequels and everyone says, oh, George Lucas should hang it up. He's washed. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore. So he sells it. And now everyone's like, we need George Lucas back. It's like, just pick a lane. Give it some time.
Enjoy it and understand that everything that someone does isn't going to be for you. And you're not going to like everything someone does. But that's art. And that's the sucky part about just having to, this being run by a business, right? So it's like, and it's the reality of things. It's not like, oh, I wish it wasn't this way. I wish it wasn't, but it's the reality of the thing that it's like.
Right. That's how I feel about a lot of it. There's a lot of things that I wish came out different or came out better or in a way that I would have liked, whether it's better or not as objective. But we have what we have. And I think there's way more good going on than bad.
Yeah, I think so too. And so it is. you do get worried when someone makes something bad that fails that you're not going to get any more of it. But it's Star Wars. We're going to get more of it. And Filoni's going to be able to tell good stories and bad stories because that's the position he's in as an artist right now.
Yeah.
I think we'll talk about The Acolyte in a couple of weeks, which from what Filoni has said, he was very involved in, not on a way where it was like overseeing the story, but approving the story and helping where he could to make sure that Leslie Headland was able to tell the story she wanted to tell. So that was a misstep, but that actually makes me optimistic for him being in charge of Lucasfilm, because he will, from what it sounds like, it wasn't his fault that show fell flat. And it probably wasn't even Leslie Headland's fault that it fell flat. It was Disney trying to push the show to be something that it wasn't. And
a lot of that show does feel like designed by committee, where on paper, early drafts was probably a pretty solid story where the character's actions made sense. But then when you change this to appease this person and change this element to get to that, but then these two things don't fit together, so you just have to make a leap that doesn't fit into anything. Like, that's how that feels, because you see that in a lot of projects.
And you see that a lot in the most recent live action projects that weren't in production for a long time, So we all point to Andor as just like, yeah, it's great. But Skeleton Crew is one of those really great shows that Filoni was involved in too, and Carrie Beck. Both of them produced and were, and Filoni was in on story meetings for that. That show also is what gives me hope for Filoni's, if he does take over Lucasfilm, and if Beck takes over Lucasfilm, or more shows like that. We can all hope for Andor, but it's not even settling for Skeleton Crew. It is hopeful that we get more stuff like Skeleton Crew, where there is a lot of thought put into it. The creators are given the time, the space, the budget to tell the story they want to tell, and bring in the talent that they want to bring in to do the best show that they can. Versus something like The Acolyte, which I feel like they had so much was riding on that.
If you're getting value or entertainment out of any of my transmissions, it would mean a lot if you would join the Remnant and subscribe.
Finn, man, I love Finn so much in this movie.
Finn could have and should have been the most interesting character in that trilogy.
He should have been what he was set up in this, which he carries this movie. This is his movie.
He's great in it.
He's so good. And one thing I don't remember is that he handles so much large exposition in this movie, like about Starkiller, about the state of the First Order. He explains so much on screen, and it's like, wow, look at John Boyega, not only just like being this charismatic, really good actor who is very relatable and very strong and charismatic, so where you're like watching the screen, you're like, yeah, this is a leading man right here. And then handles so much exposition, handles so many jokes, so well.
I was gonna say, he's also funny.
He's such a I wouldn't say not even triple threat, because he fights well. He does everything so well that you're just like, why did they, not that I love, like, and Daisy Ridley too, like the two of them are such revelations in this movie, where it's like, yeah, what great leads you guys stumbled on for
Oscar Isaac too. I was so excited with the new trio, with the three of them.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you ever saw A Most Violent Year with Oscar Isaac, because I saw that right before Force Awakens, and I'm like, this guy can do anything.
Inside Llewyn Davis was my movie with him, where people were like, who's Oscar Isaac? I'm like, Inside Llewyn Davis, one of the best movies of the decade.
Yeah, if you only know him from the sequel trilogy and Moon Knight, you haven't seen him.
No way. Yeah, no, I was even rewatching because of Andor. I decided to go back and rewatch Bourne Legacy, which Gilroy wrote and directed. And Oscar Isaac is in that.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Very small, but amazing. And it turns out Kathleen Kennedy, she produced that movie. And Tony Gilroy, they worked really hard on the casting. Both of them were championing Oscar Isaac for that movie as the star. And they couldn't get the studio to agree on a non-white actor to lead that movie. So they put him in there. I think Gilroy said no, he retooled the script so that he could have a part for Oscar Isaac in that movie. And then Kathleen Kennedy went and cast him in this, because Oscar Isaac is also just one of the greatest actors of our time.
He's so good.
Yeah. And I'm glad we get more of him in the next two movies, but I was also surprised, like, oh yeah, he's not in this very much. And
no, but I thought he was in it a great amount, or
yes.
not a great amount. Like if he was in it more, I don't think it would have been bad. But I think the times we got to see him were impactful. That's what I meant to say.
Well, that's the thing. Like, he leaves such an impact with little screen time in this movie.
Yeah.
To where you are like, yeah, no, he's the third lead of the film, even though he's in it not even half as much as the other two are. Maybe I think he's in even less than Han Solo is. And still,
I think
like,
he is, yeah.
Yeah, he has more of an impact on the movie than anybody. It doesn't, like, it feels like it's still like half a movie, you know, where it's like we go up to a point and then we're just gonna stop right there and not give you everything.
If you take this movie for just this movie, you have no idea what Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker is bringing, or even that those are the names. None of that bothered me when I initially saw this, because to me, they were setting up promises, because this was a trilogy from the start.
Right.
It's not like a season of a streaming show where they're like, we figured we'd get a season 2, so we didn't bother. It's like, you should have known better. They knew it was a trilogy, and that's also what really, because I wanted to talk about this movie alone, but you can't, because it is a trilogy.
Yeah.
So Luke's involvement, I thought, was genius.
Yeah.
Until we got a different version of Luke Skywalker. I get a lot of what Last Jedi was trying to do. I don't outright hate it, but that was not really Luke Skywalker to me. Not without a lot more tragedy.
Well, and for me, Han Solo in this movie is not Han Solo to me either. Like, I love him. Like, I love seeing more Harrison Ford and things like that, and I love him being goofy, but I always say that the better old Han Solo movie is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. You know, like this guy who never stopped doing what he was doing, you know, that kind of thing. And then just like, you know, never had a moment of like, oh yeah, I'm going to settle down and do this kind of stuff. Like he immediately just went back to just doing the same old stuff.
I can kind of see.
And Indiana Jones in that movie is so serious and like almost like he is at war all the time. When Indiana Jones is not like that the last time you see him. But like that fits more with like what Han Solo, I think, after Return of the Jedi would be, versus this very like goofy, wacky Han Solo that fits more like Indiana Jones than Han Solo for me. So
that didn't really bother me was them losing their son, because he had basically written his son off as essentially dead, like kind of how they talk about like Darth Vader killed your father from a certain point of view.
Yeah,
Kylo Ren killed Ben Solo from Han Solo's point of view. So for him to not be able to be with Leia feeling like he let her down, or you know, it's too painful to be together, I was actually on board for that. But it's another one of those promises that this movie set up that is never delivered on.
But it also just makes me sad. Like that's sort of, again,
Yes.
That's something I track with Indiana Jones, because like Indiana Jones as a character is very sad. Like it's just sort of like, you know, he's
But
like,
he also is not supposed to change.
yeah, and I feel like that tracks more with this Han Solo that never changed. When Han Solo changed in Return of the Jedi.
It does kind of undo his whole arc of the original trilogy, where he is the selfish guy, and then he's like, okay, I'll help out, but I'm going to keep you at arm's length. Okay, now I'm all in. Okay, now we're in love and all that. My thoughts watching Force Awakens was, being that this is kind of a reboot of the entire thing, kind of a retelling, it was going to take those three movies where the legacy characters were going to have their own repeat kind of story where they would come together again and they would get together to fight the big bad, and there would be this whole arc. I didn't expect him to die at the end of the first one so coldly. And actually that too, I didn't even hate, because the original plan for Kylo Ren was he was the opposite Darth Vader, where he is a good guy at heart, but is he wants to be pulled toward the bad, where Anakin was a good guy and the bad corrupted him. He didn't never wanted it, where Kylo Ren wants it and he's not quite there. So when he kills his father, that should have been the point of no return. He kills Han Solo. Yeah. And then the next movie, we're just like, nah, it's cool. He's with Daisy Ridley now. Like,
yeah, well,
I would have loved the arc where he could not be redeemed.
Right. And I feel like the one thread that Rian Johnson picked up on from this movie that then he did carry on into Last Jedi is that this guy's not going to get redeemed. You know,
yeah,
this is
because that kind of comes out of nowhere in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, it does. And so it is interesting to see that thread, that being threaded here, and then that being carried over into another movie, and then just for J.J. Abrams and Terry Rossio to not Terry Rossio, I can't remember the screenwriter's name, to just undo that in Rise of Skywalker is crazy. But I will say this movie is so jumbled up. Like I'm like, it is scene to scene what the movie is about.
I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. Today's video is sponsored by me. Imperial Remnant now has a merch store, and it's not just designed specific to the channel. I'm working with a couple talented artists to bring you unique Star Wars themed designs. Check out the link in the description. All right, back to the lore.
I would go really bold with the whole thing. Rey falling to the dark side would be to be able to rebuild her, and then you can do that thing with once she's redeemed, brought back to the light, now she has to figure out who she is. What's her place in all this? I would like to bring in Ahsoka as the old Alec Guinness Obi-Wan role, where kind of explaining the wider Force world to everybody, but she's not technically a Jedi. I think it would be cool if then we catch up with Sabine, and Sabine becomes Finn's master. And then it's Ahsoka, Sabine, Finn bringing Rey back, and then they all kind of create a new era of Jedi, but instead of calling them Jedi, they would be Skywalkers.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool idea.
It's just kind of a way to reinvent it.
Yeah, and then but also pay homage to the legacy of the Skywalkers at the same time without relying heavily on those characters.
Right, because to say that the sequel trilogy is part of the Skywalker saga is like, well, not really. It's not. It ended with Return of the Jedi when Luke's story kind of concludes and Darth Vader's dead or Anakin's dead.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that would be a really cool way of integrating all the animated stuff into a sequel trilogy movie, or like an actual sequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy movie, I guess.
Or even just, a couple movie. Yeah, I guess you would need more than one movie for Rey to fall. Because if she falls and comes back in one movie, it's cheap, it's empty, it doesn't mean anything.
No,
you have to believe she's going to stay the bad guy.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think I haven't put enough thought into what I would want for these characters following up. So that's something I'm going to have to daydream about a little bit more, because that sounds like a fun thing to do.
Well, I think it's fun, but I also think it's worth it because, like it or hate it, the sequel trilogy is canon. It's the furthest point in the movies. It's going to be continued at some time. Even if they don't bring any of the characters back, that's part of the foundation now. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I think that... I think the big thing I'm always wondering about is what the war will be, going forward, since this is Star Wars, like what will the new enemy that they'll have to face be going forward?
Well, Rey. I would have Rey be the enemy for a while.
Rey. Yeah, why not just it be Rey, So I like the idea then that, like, you could maybe even, because I kind of feel like a lot of these characters are just sort of blank slates to go where the story needs them to go in this trilogy. So...
But you'd have to fill in those gaps going forward.
You would, but that does kind of give it a... Like, I think Finn, maybe because Finn's my favorite character in the trilogy, I find him to be more defined in this first movie than a lot of the characters are. But by the end, he's definitely not defined either. But there's plenty of room to make anybody the villain and anybody the hero at this point, because, like, I think you could do a movie where Poe is the villain or somebody like that, like where he is, post when the power goes to his head and he decides, and we've seen him to be mutinous in the past. What if he decided, like, I'm not happy with the way things are going. I'm going to launch an insurrection against the government as well, or form a new republic, or
maybe he doesn't try to bring an empire back, but maybe he's the highest ranking person in the New Republic military at a point.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like the way the politicians are going, so it's almost like a military coup.
Yeah, like
even if he thinks he's doing it with the best intentions.
Yeah. Yeah, you have X-Wing on X-Wing action, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to retread too many things. Like, I know I'm talking about a dark side redemption arc, which has been done to death in Star Wars. But I wouldn't want it to be like, okay, and now instead of the Empire, it's the First Order. Now instead of the First Order, it's the Final Order. Now instead of the Final Order, it's like, no more of that.
No.
Stay away from that for a while.
Yeah, and I think then That's sort of like I've not read all of the Thrawn trilogy or anything like that, but from what it sounds like with Timothy Zahn, he understood like, oh, we just do a threat from outside the galaxy, to come in and.
The Yuzon Vong was that in the New Jedi Order era. You could do something like that. I like the idea because when you're building a new Republic, everyone's going to have different ideas. So what if you have a very aging Mon Mothma trying to take a step down, but she's kind of forced back in because she doesn't like the direction things are going, and then you could play with that as like, have you been in this fight for so long that you don't even see that it's over, or you're almost becoming the thing that you were fighting because you're trying to get it your way? You could have a lot more nuance with the characters that are not Force sensitive, because the Force is a binary good and evil, where Oscar Isaac's military insurrection, he thinks he'd be doing it for the right reasons. Mon Mothma hanging out. I'm not saying make all these people villains, because, you spend so much time with them, you don't want them all to turn bad. There's just a lot of things you could explore in an emerging government, along with a Force story that can kind of gel together, but also stay separate enough, because you could even have a thing where if Ahsoka is in that elderly Obi-Wan role, and then the government's like, well, we need you to do this and we need your help here. She's like, I lived through the Jedi being corrupted by serving the government. I'm not doing that again.
I think it would be kind of, and I think that's the place to go, because we've always seen all the Star Wars trilogies have been about in and around the Empire, rising to power, falling, rising again, that kind of thing. Actually, we never see it rising again. That we haven't seen much of any reconstruction in this story ever. Yeah. Even now, in the New Republic shows, we don't see the New Republic being constructed very much.
No, it's just kind of there. I mean, the books explore a little bit where it's like, oh, we don't have resources, we don't have ships, this place got left behind, whatever.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see characters be like, we don't want to make this mistake again, where we build up a republic and then we forget about the authoritarians trying to take power all the time, or we. So it'd be interesting to have Poe be like, I think then that means we put them all to death, that kind of thing. Like, we don't want this ever happening again. We need to be hunting down any sympathizers and killing them. And then you have Mon Mothma be like, I don't think that's a very diplomatic way to do. We don't want to be like, just letting them all. Yeah,
you could almost start reverse engineering like the path of Andor, where it's like the rebellion started off really violent and hard, and then it got more hopeful and more political.
Yeah, so you could do that, but like sort of try to find what the new government for the galaxy is in that trilogy or in that movie, where they are, is it going to be something where we have one leader, or is it like a leader, like, a system, or, does it go back to like the Senate idea of like all systems having a representative to discuss policy and things like that?
Yeah, and for sure they would have to go to the direction of it being a republic, because that's the good guys. That's what you want.
That's the good guys, but I kind of feel like it would be nice, and it would be a fun way to explore whether that was the best choice for a government in the first place also, where it's like, do we, how do we police this going forward so that we don't have a confederation trying to buy all the power, and we don't have one chancellor standing over everybody making a decision,
right, who's consolidating power again and emergency powers and creating wars. So
it's sort of like, do we trust Mon Mothma? Do we trust one person to make this choice for everybody?
Right.
I think it would be kind of cool to see, because we don't see that story very much either. It's just the struggle of starting a new government,
right. And so of course you would have to do it with war constantly, otherwise it's a very boring movie.
Well, I think the second act of Hamilton does a really good job of showing the struggle of that. You know? And so if you do a Star Wars movie that's just the second act of Hamilton, I'd be down for that.
That's true.
Do the struggles of trying to figure out what a new government looks like.
And you could even set that up as an era where you have independently told stories that they're trying to move toward, where you have this group over here trying to save this system, or this system didn't get resources and it's being taken over by pirates because of that. You could have all of these other different stories because the galaxy is infinite. So keep dipping into it.
And then what I would love to see is so that they make sure that, like, sorry, we can go on about this all day, but one pitch I have now, just thinking about it, that would be really cool. And that was because I watched Superman 4 Quest for Peace. I'm watching a lot of Superman stuff right now.
You're watching the bad ones.
I love Superman 4. It's not a good movie at all, but I love it. It's like how I love the prequels. It's not as bad as it's not as good as the prequels.
Right.
But Superman 4 is bad, but it's really fun. There are some ideas touched on in that movie that would be really interesting in Star Wars is disarmament. Like, how do we make sure we don't get any more Death Stars built? You know,
and what level of disarmament? Because I think they do that in some of the books. They're like, well, let's get rid of the fleet. And it's like, but what if the bad guys have a fleet?
Right, exactly. So the idea of disarmament would be a really cool thing where it's like, how do we limit people making weapons out of kyber crystals and things like that? Does that mean we have to stop lightsabers from being, built? Does that make lightsabers illegal? That kind of thing. That's a very nerdy thing to say, but it would be cool to do a disarmament story about, like, how do we make sure that we do not have any more planet-killing weapons in the galaxy? Because in Rise of Skywalker, they introduced that, like, Star Destroyers can be outfitted with planet-destroying weapons at this point.
Right, if the technology is that accessible, it's like, well, then can you just have, like, a hand grenade that destroys a city?
Right, like, how do we stop that? And then do war profiteers become the next empire? The war manufacturers that we see a little bit on Canto Bight on Last Jedi, do they become the enemy we have to face when they're like, we want to stop any talks of disarmament, so we're going to outfit.
We're going to create a war so you need us, yeah. Which actually fits into George Lucas's original thing, if I wanted to show how money corrupts politics.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like there's a lot of options you could go with. But I think, going off of what you were saying, I feel like you could tell a story about reconstructing the Jedi and trying to figure out what the next Jedi Order looks like, so that they're not just repeating the same thing over again.
Yeah, how do you rebuild it while making them Jedi without repeating all of the mistakes?
Right, so having Ahsoka be like, I saw the hypocrisy of the Jedi Order. We don't want to do that again. I saw that the Jedi Order is as responsible for creating Darth Vader as Emperor Palpatine is. Like, we don't want to do that again, because also Luke tried to do that again, and he created Kylo Ren, that kind of thing. So, like, we don't want to be repeating the same things. So to see a Reconstruction era Star Wars, that's my deepest desire right there. To see.
Yeah, that's the best way. We need to make the Reconstruction era. You have the prequel era, the original trilogy era, the sequel era. You have the High Republic era, the Old Republic. You need the Reconstruction era now.
Reconstruction era of, like, setting up a new form of government that will not lead to any more wars. And then in the meantime,
and simultaneously a new version. That's what a new Jedi Order is. It's not making the same old thing. It's a new order.
And I like the idea of them being Skywalkers. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, I like the idea that they're not
That's
Jedi
the way that the
anymore.
Rise of Skywalker title makes sense to me. She can't just well, I'm a Skywalker. It's like, what? No, you're not.
Yeah.